The sound of Miranda Blake's heels echoed through the company's hallways, marking her territory like a lioness ruling the savannah. She walked with perfect posture, chin held high, exuding the air of someone who knew exactly where she was headed. Her confidence preceded her. She was powerful, wealthy, and ruthless. Miranda tolerated no mistakes, and her secretary was often the main target of her relentless behavior. Emily sat at her desk, organizing Miranda's schedule for the day. Her fingers glided across the keyboard with precision, but her eyes betrayed the exhaustion she carried. It wasn't just the workload that wore her down, but the toxic environment she found herself in. Still, her face remained neutral, revealing no weakness. It was something she had learned early on. Never show what you're feeling. Emily? Miranda's sharp voice cut through the air, followed by the loud slam of her office door. The businesswoman emerged with a cold gaze. Where is last week's sales report? I emailed it to you, Miranda. It arrived 15 minutes ago. Emily remained calm, not lifting her eyes from the screen. Miranda crossed her arms, impatient. 15 minutes? Why didn't you inform me? I'm not a mind reader, Emily. I didn't want to interrupt your meeting. I thought you'd see it when you were done. You're not paid to think. You're paid to follow instructions and make sure I have everything I need on time. Is it really that hard to do something so simple? Emily took a deep breath, choosing not to respond. She knew that saying anything would only make matters worse. Miranda was like that, unforgiving, demanding, always ready to find fault in even the smallest details. The businesswoman retreated to her office, leaving Emily to endure the glances from other employees around her, watching with a mixture of pity and fear. Inside her glass-walled office, Miranda observed the bustling workplace. She liked being in control of everything and everyone. Emily was efficient. Miranda couldn't deny that. But in her eyes, she lacked ambition. Why would someone with Emily's talent choose to be just a secretary? It was baffling. To Miranda, life was a constant climb for power. The fact that Emily accepted her position without ever questioning or trying for more irritated her. In her moments of frustration, Miranda wondered why she kept Emily around. But the answer was simple. The young woman was good at her job. Even so, something about her deeply unsettled Miranda, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the calmness with which Emily handled the abuse, the way she never seemed to break under pressure. Does she think she's better than me? Miranda thought to herself, turning her attention back to the numbers glowing on her computer screen. Meanwhile, Emily tried to refocus on her work, but Miranda's words echoed in her mind. Humiliations like that were frequent, and as much as she tried to ignore them, she began to wonder how much longer she could endure it. It wasn't for the money. She knew that well. Emily came from one of the wealthiest families in the city, but she preferred to keep that to herself. She wanted to live a simple life, to learn from her own experiences, and, above all, not be defined by her last name. And Miranda, of course, had no idea. Few people knew. Emily made a point to keep her identity out of the spotlight. She worked for Miranda's company to gain experience before taking over her family's business. But each day, that goal seemed farther away. The environment became increasingly suffocating. Miranda's behavior, which at first seemed like mere provocation, now felt like a sick form of pleasure, as if the businesswoman was using Emily as a means to unload her personal frustrations on the one person who didn't challenge her. Emily, I need you in the conference room. Now. Miranda's voice rang out again, this time more controlled. She wasn't alone. There was a buzz of important voices in the background, a meeting with shareholders and partners. Emily already knew what was coming. She collected her tablet and the documents she had prepared for the meeting. Upon entering the room, she felt the eyes of everyone present on her. They were all waiting for Miranda, who stood in the center like a queen, dictating the pace of the conversation. Ah, so glad you could finally join us, Emily, Miranda said with mockery, not taking her eyes off the shareholders. Everyone, this is Emily, my secretary, the one person who apparently doesn't understand the concept of urgency. Soft chuckles spread across the room. Emily kept her face impassive, though inside her heart raced. This kind of public humiliation was common, but today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the accumulation of years of mistreatment, or maybe it was the family meeting scheduled for later that day, but Emily felt a surge of defiance she hadn't felt before. the urge to speak, but not right now. She took a deep breath and handed out the meeting documents with the calmness of someone above the situation. "Here are the reports you requested," she said gently, not meeting Miranda's sarcastic gaze. The businesswoman took the documents, but couldn't resist making a snide comment to the group. "Now let's see if she finally got it right." Emily kept her eyes fixed on the table. She knew she couldn't let this break her. But at the same time, more and more, she felt the need to put an end to this situation. Hours later, when the meeting was over, Emily returned to her desk. Miranda walked past her as if she were invisible, just another object in the office. The shareholders were satisfied, of course, but none of that seemed to matter to the businesswoman, who always wanted more. Emily, however, knew her time at the company was nearing its end. Her family awaited an important decision from her that night, and she knew she would have to confront her choices. Being the heiress to a fortune came with responsibilities, and Miranda's company was not the future she wanted. That night, as she closed the door to her house, Emily felt something different in her heart. The end of this cycle was approaching, and Miranda Blake had no idea what was coming. The next morning, the office was quiet when Emily arrived. It was early, much earlier than usual, but she wanted a moment of peace before Miranda Blake stormed in like a whirlwind. She placed her coffee on the desk, organized the documents that needed reviewing throughout the day, and took a deep breath. There was something decisive in the air, something she knew would change everything soon. As she reviewed emails, her phone vibrated on the desk. It was a message from her father. "We need to talk about the succession today. The board is awaiting your decision, Emily. We can't delay any longer." She closed her eyes for a moment. The weight of that decision had been hanging over her for weeks, and no matter how much she tried to distance herself from it, she knew she couldn't avoid it forever. Her family wanted her to take over the business, a chain of luxury hotels spread across various UIS cities. Emily knew how important this was to her father, but she also knew that accepting it would mean giving up the independence she so valued. She wanted to prove herself, to show that she could grow on her own merits without relying on the family fortune. That was what led her to accept the job with Miranda without ever revealing her true identity. But now, everything was about to fall apart. The elevator doors opened, and as expected, Miranda appeared, elegant, impassive, with a look that conveyed she was the most important person in the room. Emily could feel the energy shift the moment the businesswoman entered. Miranda walked right past her, as always, without even a "good morning." "Emily!" Miranda's voice screeched minutes later. "Bring me the profit spreadsheets from the last quarter and the market projection report for the investors. And don't take long." Without showing any emotion, Emily gathered the documents and entered Miranda's office. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. The businesswoman stood, facing the panoramic window overlooking the city. Miranda rarely sat down when she was angry. "Do you realize what's at stake with this new round of investments?" Miranda began, without turning to face Emily. "These people expect perfection. I cannot tolerate mistakes at this stage of the company." Emily placed the reports on the desk, staying calm in the face of her boss's usual tension. "Here are the data you asked for. Everything is updated." Miranda turned slowly, her cold eyes evaluating the secretary, as if examining a faulty piece of equipment. "I hope so, Emily. I'm tired of cleaning up your mistakes." The attacks were always like this, impersonal, calculated. Miranda knew exactly where to strike to provoke a reaction, but what the businesswoman didn't realize was that Emily no longer responded. At least, not in the way she expected. That constant humiliation, the need to always show power, to belittle others, began to expose something Miranda tried to hide, her own fear. The businesswoman, as strong and ruthless as she was, always seemed on the edge of losing control. It was this that made her so cruel. "Hey, is there anything else I can help with?" Emily asked, her voice steady. Miranda stared for a few more seconds, as if searching for something to criticize in the young woman. "For now, no. Leave." Emily left the office without looking back. Each day that passed, her decision became clearer in her mind. It was time to break free. Hours later, as most people were leaving, Miranda was still in her office, the building now empty around her. Emily, as always, was one of the last to leave. She was about to shut down her computer when the phone rang on her desk. "Emily, come to my office." Miranda's voice sounded dry on the other end of the line. Sighing, Emily grabbed her things and walked toward the businesswoman's office. Upon entering, she saw Miranda seated at her desk, staring at a set of papers. Her expression was serious, even colder than usual, even for her standards. "I've been thinking," Miranda began without lifting her eyes from the papers. "How long have you been working with me?" 3 years, Emily replied, confused by the sudden change in tone. 3 years, Miranda muttered, as if calculating something. "And yet you seem stagnant. There's no ambition in you, Emily. You're content with the bare minimum. I've always wondered why." The comment stirred something inside Emily, but she remained calm. I do my job with dedication, Miranda. That's never been a problem." "Dedication isn't enough," Miranda retorted, standing abruptly and walking to the window. "I've thought about giving you more responsibilities, but honestly, I don't see a future for you here. You don't have what it takes to grow." Emily felt a tightening in her chest, but it wasn't sadness or fear. It was a mix of release and suppressed anger. Miranda's words were the perfect excuse for what was coming next. "Miranda," Emily began, her voice calm but firm. "I think you're right. Maybe it's time for me to move on." Miranda turned, surprised. The businesswoman had expected a different reaction, maybe a plea, an attempt to redeem herself. But what she saw in Emily's face was a determination she wasn't prepared to face. "I've thought about this for a long time," Emily continued. "The truth is, I don't need to be here anymore. I don't need to deal with this environment." Miranda frowned. "What are you saying? You think you'll find something better? Who would hire you after leaving here?" Emily gave a half smile. It was time to reveal the truth. "I don't know if you remember, Miranda, but my last name is Westwood. My family owns the most luxurious hotel chain in the country. I took this job to learn, to gain real experience before taking my place in the company. And honestly, I've learned more than I expected." The silence in the room was absolute. Miranda blinked, as if the words didn't make sense at first. But slowly, the truth sank in. Emily, her humble secretary, was the heiress to an immeasurable fortune. All the time Miranda believed she was in control, humiliating her, belittling her. Emily could have walked away whenever she wanted. "What?" Miranda stammered, unable to believe what she was hearing. "I never needed this job, Miranda. I chose to be here, and I chose to learn what it means to fight for what you want. But this..." Emily gestured vaguely to the office around her. "This isn't what I want." For the first time, Miranda was speechless. The control was slipping from her hands like fine sand, and she didn't know how to react. Emily took one last look at the woman in front of her, who seemed more lost than ever. "Thank you for everything, Miranda. I've learned a lot, including what I don't want to become." And with that, she left the office, leaving Miranda to face the reality of her own defeat. The days following Emily's revelation felt like a silent earthquake in the office. The wheels kept turning, meetings happened, and numbers were aligned, but there was a palpable tension in the air. Miranda Blake, once unbeatable, seemed shaken. The truth about Emily's heritage had hit her like a punch to the gut, and now she didn't know how to deal with the young woman's presence in her office. Emily, on the other hand, continued her routine impeccably, as always. However, her posture was different. There was a newfound confidence, a freedom in her walk that Miranda could no longer ignore, and it was eating her up inside. She tried to maintain control over things, but now nothing seemed to be in place. It was a Monday afternoon, and Miranda was in a meeting with the company's main investors, discussing a new expansion strategy for the upcoming quarter. She spoke with her usual authoritative tone, presenting the slides with precise figures and projections, but her mind was elsewhere, wandering through recent events. The investors, respectful but increasingly concerned, had started to notice a shift in her leadership. They trusted the company's ability to generate profit, but the tension between her and her team, especially with Emily, had become too obvious to ignore. "Miranda," one of the investors said, interrupting the presentation, "I need to be honest. We've received some observations about the company's internal atmosphere. It could affect our long-term confidence. What's your position on that?" Miranda froze for a second. The question was clear. They were worried. She immediately realized that this had to do with Emily. Maybe word had begun to spread. Emily hadn't said anything directly, but her very presence now felt like a threat. Since the revelation, Miranda had felt as though there was a shadow looming over her authority. Before she could respond, the door to the meeting room opened. It was Emily, walking in with her usual calm and poise, holding a folder of financial reports. Sorry to interrupt, but I brought last month's financials to complement the projections." Miranda shot her an intense look, but Emily didn't flinch. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, there was a silent challenge between them, a reminder that Miranda no longer had the control she thought she did. The investors watched the exchange, noting Miranda's discomfort and Emily's serene confidence. One of them asked, "Emily, would you mind giving us an overview of the data? Miranda mentioned you've been deeply involved in these projections." Miranda almost choked. She had always prided herself on being the center of attention in investor meetings, but now, her own team seemed to be paying more attention to her secretary, the one she had always underestimated. Without hesitation, Emily began to explain the reports with clarity and precision. She spoke with insight and understanding, impressing everyone present. It became evident that, contrary to what Miranda had always believed, Emily was far more than just a secretary. She had a deep grasp of the business, and it was reflected in every word she said. At the end of her explanation, one of the investors complimented her. "Thank you, Emily. Your observations are invaluable. I believe your perspective could be very beneficial for the future of the company." Miranda clenched her jaw, her mind racing. She realized in that moment that something was slipping away from her irrevocably. She needed to act fast. The power she had always wielded over Emily was now shattered, and the young woman was being seen as a vital asset by those who held the company's financial reins. Later that same day, Miranda locked herself in her office, alone. The atmosphere outside the meeting room was buzzing with murmurs. She could feel the tension in the air as the executives whispered amongst themselves, now openly questioning her leadership. It was no longer just about numbers. She was losing her authority. Emily's, on the other hand, appeared untouchable. The truth about her identity hadn't spread openly yet, but those closest to Miranda had already begun to suspect there was more to the story of the secretary the businesswoman had so often mistreated. From her glass office, Miranda watched everything. Her facade of power was beginning to crumble, and the worst part was that she no longer had control over the flow of events. She felt cornered, like a queen trapped in a castle surrounded by invisible enemies. That night, long after the office had emptied, Miranda stayed in her office, gazing out at the city below. The silence of the company only amplified the chaos inside her mind. She had always believed that power and control were the keys to success, but now, faced with Emily and her own vulnerability, she began to realize that perhaps she had lost something far more important, the respect and loyalty of her team. Emily was preparing to leave when she received a message from her father. "The investors in our hotel chain are pushing for an expedited succession. We need your decision by the end of the week." She took a deep breath. The decision was becoming clearer with each passing day, and whatever choice she made would not only change her life, but also the future of the company. The next morning, the storm Miranda had feared finally arrived. When she entered the office, there was an electric tension in the air. Executives gathered in small groups, whispering as they nervously glanced toward the boardroom, where a company-wide meeting was about to take place. Emily stood among them, her calm demeanor contrasting with the chaos around her. Miranda, however, maintained her proud stance, but inside, she was crumbling. She knew this morning's meeting would be unlike any other. As everyone took their seats around the large glass table, the silence was palpable. Miranda began the usual presentation, but the board's questions quickly shifted toward the internal issues. They wanted to know about the company's morale, the recent upheavals, and most of all, her leadership. Then, one of the board members, a sharp-eyed middle-aged man, turned directly to Emily. "Emily, we'd like to hear your thoughts. You're at the center of these matters, having direct contact with both the team and leadership. What's your view on the company's future?" Miranda froze. The room held its breath, waiting for Emily's response. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. She knew this was her chance to end the cycle of abuse and humiliation. Looking directly at Miranda, she spoke calmly. "I believe this company has enormous potential, but to reach that potential, it's essential that everyone here feels valued, from the top down. The environment needs to be a place where people can grow without fear." A heavy silence followed. Emily's words were a veiled critique of Miranda's leadership, and everyone in the room understood it. The board member nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right, Emily. We need significant changes, and your vision is exactly what we need now." Miranda's face tightened, panic hidden beneath her controlled expression. She knew what this meant. Emily, the secretary she had humiliated for years, was poised to become a key player in the company, one she might no longer be able to control. After the meeting, the office was plunged into a heavy silence. Everyone avoided commenting aloud, but it was impossible to ignore the tension that spread through the corridors. Miranda Blake, always the uncontested figure of authority, had been publicly challenged for the first time. And the most surprising part was that the challenge had not come from a competitor or a senior executive, but from Emily Calm, the young secretary everyone had underestimated. Emily, however, remained poised. She knew her words in the meeting had a deeper impact than just addressing the company's culture. They had the potential to change the course of her life entirely, and perhaps the future of the company itself. As she returned to her desk, she took a deep breath, absorbing the weight of what had just happened, but there was also a sense of freedom within her. For so long, she had stayed silent, enduring Miranda's abusive behavior, waiting for the right moment to act. Now, it felt like the burden of the last 3 years was beginning to lift. The decision she needed to make about her family's hotel empire was becoming clearer in her mind with each passing day. As the day dragged on, Miranda remained isolated in her office. Seated in her leather chair, her eyes fixed on the window, she replayed every word Emily had said during the meeting. Those words, simple but sharp, had dismantled the facade of control Miranda had tried so desperately to maintain. She had always prided herself on her power, her ability to command respect, and her iron-fisted leadership. But now, she found herself alone in a room that felt colder and emptier by the second. Miranda began to realize that, at some point, she had lost the respect of her team, and perhaps even her own self-respect. How did it come to this? She whispered to herself, her fingers tapping nervously on the glass-topped desk. Emily, the young woman she had believed to be just another replaceable cog in her machine, was actually the heiress to a vast fortune, and more importantly, someone who had earned the respect of everyone around her. Miranda felt a fear creep into her heart. It wasn't the fear of losing power, but the fear of facing the truth. She had failed, and maybe it was too late to fix it. The phone on her desk rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from one of the investors, requesting an urgent meeting with the board. Miranda knew what that meant. They were questioning her leadership more directly than ever before. In the days that followed, the atmosphere inside the company grew increasingly tense. Rumors of a possible leadership change began to circulate, and Miranda's figure seemed more fragile than ever. Emily, on the other hand, was now being seen in a different light by her colleagues. It was no longer a secret that she wasn't just a regular secretary. She had influence, power, and most importantly, the trust of the investors. The whispers about Emily's wealthy background started to spread, albeit discreetly. Some employees viewed her with admiration, while others with envy. But regardless of how she was perceived, one thing was clear. Emily had shifted the dynamics of the company forever. However, Miranda wasn't about to give up so easily. In a desperate attempt to regain control, she called for a meeting with the board and key investors. She was determined to prove that she was still the best person to lead the company, that her experience and vision were irreplaceable. As the meeting was scheduled, the tension inside the company became almost unbearable. Everyone knew that this meeting would be decisive for Miranda's future, and perhaps for the company's future as well. On the afternoon of the meeting, Miranda entered the conference room with calculated steps. Her expression was serious, but resolute. The investors and board members were already seated, and Emily was present as well, sitting calmly at the other end of the table, her usual serenity unwavering. But this time, there was something more. A quiet conviction that seemed to signal she knew exactly what was coming. The chairman of the board began speaking, breaking the heavy silence in the room. "Thank you all for coming. We've called this meeting to discuss the company's recent performance and the direction we believe it should take in the coming months. As you know, leadership at the company is in transition, and we have some important decisions to make." Miranda remained silent, waiting for the moment when everything would be revealed. Her heart was racing, but her face betrayed nothing. She wouldn't give Emily the satisfaction of seeing her falter. After a series of discussions with the investors and senior staff, the chairman continued, "the board has decided that it's time for a definitive change in the company's leadership. Miranda, your work here has been exceptional. Under your leadership, the company has grown and reached new heights, but we believe the current moment requires a new approach." Miranda held her breath. And then the announcement came. Emily Westwood will be named CEO of the company. The impact of those words made time seem to freeze for Miranda. Her face remained stoic, but inside, it felt like the ground had vanished beneath her feet. She had been dethroned, and worse, by the very person she had underestimated the most. "Of course," the chairman continued, attempting to soften the blow. "We hope you, Miranda, will stay on as a strategic consultant during this transition period, helping Emily become familiar with all aspects of the company's leadership." But Miranda knew what that meant. She was no longer the leader. She was being sidelined, relegated to a peripheral role while Emily took full control. The businesswoman stayed silent for a few seconds, which felt like an eternity. Finally, with the cold composure that was her trademark, she stood up from the table. "I understand your decision," Miranda said, her voice steady but tinged with bitterness. "I'll do whatever is necessary to ensure a smooth transition." She looked directly at Emily, who watched her calmly, without any hint of vengeance or triumph, just determination. "Congratulations, Emily," Miranda said, emotionless, before walking out of the room. In the days that followed, Miranda withdrew more and more from the company's daily operations. Her role as a strategic consultant was merely symbolic, and she knew it. The young woman she had scorned had not only won the trust of the board and investors, but also the loyalty of the team. Emily was now the face of the company, and rightfully so. Meanwhile, Emily stepped into her new role with the grace and strength that had defined her all along. She wasn't authoritarian like Miranda, but she wasn't passive either. She knew when to make firm decisions and when to listen to others. Her leadership style was marked by genuine attention to the needs of her team, fostering a more collaborative and productive environment. Gradually, the wounds left by Miranda's reign began to heal, and the company thrived under Emily's leadership. Emily hadn't forgotten the humiliations she had endured over the years, but she chose not to let them consume her. Instead, she used her experiences to strengthen her vision of leadership. That real power lies in how you treat those around you. She knew the transition for Miranda would be difficult, for everyone. That's why Emily made a point of keeping the door open for her, offering opportunities for Miranda to contribute with her expertise. But Miranda, wounded and proud, declined every offer. Weeks later, Emily received Miranda's formal resignation letter. There were no farewells, no grand speeches. Miranda simply disappeared from the company she had built, leaving behind only the silence of her departure. The once dominant businesswoman was now alone. Emily, however, refused to let that shadow linger over the company. Under her leadership, the company continued to grow, but in a more human and connected way. She implemented new development programs for employees, improved working conditions, and created an environment where everyone felt part of the success. The change was visible. Emily's pride didn't come from her new position, but from the transformation she had helped create. Every day, she reminded herself why she had taken the job in the first place. It wasn't for the money or the power. It was for the experience, the learning. And now, she was reaping the rewards of her patience and perseverance. Months later, on a quiet afternoon, Emily received an unexpected letter. It was from Miranda. There was only one line, handwritten. "You beat me." And maybe, deep down, that's what I always feared. Emily tucked the letter away in her desk drawer, not with bitterness, but with quiet understanding. She had won, yes, but not in the way Miranda had imagined. Her true victory was in not allowing herself to be consumed by the same venom that had destroyed her former boss. And that was something no letter, not even one from Miranda, could take away from her. The future was just beginning for Emily, and now she knew. Real power didn't lie in humiliating or controlling others, but in inspiring and transforming those around you. Days passed, and the atmosphere at the company transformed in a subtle but constant way. The meetings, once dominated solely by Miranda's imposing presence, now carried the gentle but firm influence of Emily. Her promotion to vice president was no longer seen as a surprise, but rather a natural consequence of her competence and strategic vision. The board, which once hesitated, now supported her with increasing confidence. For Miranda, this was a daily defeat. Every new decision Emily made, every successful idea or compliment she received, felt like a blow to Miranda's armor. The businesswoman, who had ruled with an iron fist for years, now watched her influence crumble bit by bit. Worse yet, she felt her own team was turning against her. Employees who had once been subservient were now seeking out Emily for advice and guidance. One morning, Miranda received an unexpected email. It was a summons for an extraordinary board meeting. No specific details were provided, just a date and time. Her instincts told her that something serious was about to happen, and the feeling of control slipping through her fingers filled her with anxiety. On the day of the meeting, Miranda entered the conference room with her usual confident posture, her chin lifted as if she still believed she was in charge. Around her, the board members exchanged discreet glances but remained silent. Emily was also present, sitting calmly at the far end of the table with the same quiet serenity that always accompanied her. However, this time there was something more, a firm conviction, as though she knew exactly what was coming. The board chairman began to speak, breaking the heavy silence in the room. Thank you all for attending. We've called this meeting to discuss the company's recent performance and the direction we believe it needs to take moving forward. As you all know, leadership here is in a period of transition, and we have some important decisions to make. Miranda stayed silent, waiting for the moment when everything would be laid bare. Her heart raced, but her face remained expressionless. She wouldn't allow Emily the satisfaction of seeing her weaken. After a series of meetings and discussions with investors and senior staff, the chairman continued. The board has come to the decision that it's time for a definitive change in leadership. Miranda, you've done an outstanding job in growing this company to where it is today. Under your leadership, we've achieved great heights, but we believe that the future requires a new direction, one that aligns with the evolving needs of the company. Miranda's breath caught as she braced herself for what was coming next. We've decided to promote Emily Westwood to the position of CEO, effective immediately. The words hit like a hammer. Miranda's face remained frozen, but inside, it felt as if the floor had fallen away beneath her. She had been removed, and even worse, by the person she had belittled and underestimated for so long. Of course, the chairman added, attempting to soften the impact. We'd like you, Miranda, to stay on as a strategic consultant during this transition period to help Emily get fully up to speed with the executive responsibilities. But Miranda knew exactly what that meant. She wasn't the leader anymore. She was being sidelined, pushed into a symbolic role while Emily would take the reins. She sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, before finally standing with her trademark cool composure. I understand the board's decision, Miranda said, her voice steady, though laced with a bitterness she couldn't entirely conceal. I will do what's necessary to ensure a smooth transition. She turned to face Emily, who met her gaze with the same calm demeanor, without any hint of malice or triumph. There was only determination in her eyes. Congratulations, Emily, Miranda said, her voice devoid of emotion, before walking out of the room. In the weeks that followed, Miranda distanced herself from the day-to-day operations of the company. Her role as a strategic consultant was purely ceremonial, and she knew it. The young woman she had scorned for so long had not only won the trust of the board and investors, but also the respect of the entire team. Emily was now the face of the company, and she had earned every bit of it. Meanwhile, Emily stepped into her role as CEO with the grace and strength that had always defined her. She wasn't authoritarian like Miranda had been, but she wasn't passive either. Emily knew when to make tough decisions and when to listen to those around her. Her leadership style fostered a sense of collaboration and mutual respect, and gradually, The wounds left by Miranda's reign began to heal. The company, under Emily's guidance, continued to grow, but with a new sense of purpose and unity. Emily hadn't forgotten the years of humiliation she had endured, but she chose not to dwell on them. Instead, she used her experience to shape her leadership philosophy. True power comes from how you inspire and uplift those around you, not from controlling or belittling them. She also understood that the transition would be difficult for Miranda, who had built her career around wielding absolute control. That's why Emily kept the door open, offering Miranda opportunities to contribute her expertise. But Miranda, too proud and too wounded, rejected each offer. Weeks passed, and then one day, Emily received Miranda's formal resignation letter. There was no grand farewell, no speeches, no dramatic gestures. Miranda simply disappeared from the company she had built, leaving behind only the echo of her absence. The once powerful businesswoman, who had ruled with an iron grip, was now alone. Emily, however, refused to let that shadow linger over the company. Under her leadership, the business continued to thrive, but now with a more human touch. She implemented new employee development programs, improved working conditions, and fostered an environment where everyone felt valued and empowered. The changes were obvious. Emily's pride wasn't in her new title or the power that came with it, but in the transformation she had helped bring about. Every day, she remembered why she had taken the job with Miranda in the first place. It wasn't for the money or the prestige. It was for the experience, the learning. And now, she was reaping the rewards of her patience and perseverance. Months later, on a quiet afternoon, Emily received an unexpected letter. It was from Miranda. The letter contained only one handwritten line: "You won." And maybe, deep down, that's what I always feared. Emily tucked the letter away in her desk drawer, not with bitterness, but with quiet understanding. She had won, yes, but not in the way Miranda had imagined. Her true victory was in not becoming consumed by the same toxicity that had destroyed her former boss. And that was something no letter, not even one from Miranda, could take away. The future was just beginning for Emily, and now she knew for certain. True power wasn't about humiliating or controlling others, but about leading with empathy, transforming lives, and inspiring change. Emily Westwood's journey from secretary to CEO had reshaped not only the company, but also her own understanding of leadership and success. The company flourished under her care, but more than that, it had become a place where employees felt valued, heard, and inspired. It was the kind of company that Miranda Blake had never envisioned, and it was thriving precisely because of that shift. For Emily, the experience had taught her that power doesn't have to be ruthless, that influence doesn't require domination. Leadership could be about nurturing growth, both in business and in people, and as she led the company into the future, she carried those lessons with her, shaping a legacy built on respect, integrity, and vision.